Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. Today we're going to talk about why you should fire nice people. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But I'll explain in just a minute down here at the beach. So there are some people that no matter how well you clean them up, they are just dirty on the inside. And I'm talking here about people who make decisions about people without actually having anything to go on except what they can see on the outside. They see an older person and they think, well, they don't want to work. Or they see a young person and they think, well, he's not going to want to, do the job. He's not going to want to do the really difficult work that I have to do, you know. Or they see a person who's Hispanic or black or Indian and think, well, that's they don't fit in with the people here at work, so I think maybe we ought to shy away from them. And as a result of that, what they do is they foster a workforce that is very much like them. And inevitably, if it doesn't run afoul of the discrimination laws somewhere along the line, the business winds up closing because that kind of atmosphere creates the kind of environment where no business can really be successful because you only wind up serving people who are just like you. And generally speaking, there are not that many sort of internally ugly people in the world. Because there are those kinds of people in the world, Congress back in the 1960s passed the Civil Rights Act. And the Civil Rights Act put into place a number of protections for people of color. Basically, it's age, sex, race, religion, and pregnancy. And and national origin. All of those are protected categories, and you absolutely cannot fire or refuse to hire somebody on those bases. That's because you can't control how old you are. You can't jump in a time machine and go back 10 years. You can't control what the color of your skin is. You can't control where your parents came from. You can't control what sex you are when you were born. For all of these reasons, there are laws that protect people from discrimination on the basis of these inherent characteristics that people cannot change. And so, as a result of that, the law has sort of risen up in the last, what would that be, uh, 60 years, I guess, to sort of contour and tailor the law of anti-discrimination in certain ways. And because of the way the law has developed, there are certain things that I think most employers and indeed most managers don't realize. And for that reason, I want to explain why you should fire nice people. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that's really a mean thing to say. Is Tony gone over to the dark side? Is he now the Grinch? Is he Ebenezer Scrooge? Not at all. And the reason that I say you should fire nice people is because there is a presumption, I think, among both human resource managers and managers in general that if someone is nice, they can be rehabilitated. They can be led down the path to being successful. And I think in some cases that is true. But in many cases it is not true. And what it winds up doing is placing a burden on the other people who are in the office or the workplace. So let me explain this in the context of something that happened to me. When I worked as the manager of cardiopulmonary in a hospital in Ohio, I had an individual who was a registered respiratory therapist, which is at the time was the highest level of respiratory therapist you could be, and he was assigned to work in the level 3 nursery that we had. Now, a level 3 nursery is the highest form of nursery. You should be able to take care of any sick infant that can be taken care of in that nursery. And for whatever reason, he got panicked in the middle of a code and he dropped the resuscitation bag. Now, the resuscitation bag is a little rubberized plastic bag that you squeeze and you use that to breathe for the infant. And he couldn't put it back together. A respiratory therapy student in their first year of school could put that bag back together, but he was panicked and he lost his composure and he couldn't get the bag back together. And he didn't have the presence of mind to ask someone else to bring a bag from one of the other beds. And whether it was directly responsible or not, the neonatologist certainly thought that it was responsible for the death of that infant. Now, that is absolutely the worst possible thing you can have in a hospital, is to have the death of an infant. And I wasn't in the hospital at the time. This happened at about, I think, 10:30 at night. And births happen all the time. They happen at every hour of the day, so you have to have competent people on. This individual, in addition to being a respiratory therapist, was also someone who was very interested in basically pushing to have a union in the hospital. And as a result, he was the first person to allege discrimination based on his status as a potential union member. But when you kill a child, as far as I'm concerned, you don't have any business doing that job. If you want to work doing something that doesn't require you to resuscitate infants, that's fine, but you don't have any business working in the hospital where you have to do that. So I went down to human resources, and the person in human resources told me, well, we can't fire him. I guess we could suspend him for a couple of days. And I'm like, are you serious? Do you not understand that he indirectly caused the death of an infant? I mean, this is not something that is minor. And the human resources manager looked up and he said, well, there's a problem with that. I said, you're telling me there's a problem with it. He said, no, 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 you don't understand. You see, we've had nurses who have given the wrong medication and it's killed patients, and we didn't fire them. And I said, what? You did what? You didn't fire somebody when they killed somebody? You didn't think that was appropriate? Well, no, they were really nice nurses. And as a result of that, having made that decision previously, they didn't feel like they could go back on it because it might look pretextual. At the time, I was not in law, so I didn't understand the basis for their decision. And basically, I said, well, I sure hope you don't put that in the hospital's marketing literature, because I don't think, for the most part, most people would be very interested in coming to a hospital where nurses who had killed people were still working. And it left me with this idea that in order to be fired from a Catholic hospital, you had to be caught on videotape, axe murdering a nun, and it had to be like the Mother Superior. So, a little bit of an overstatement there, but that was pretty much what I felt about that hospital. It's interesting from my standpoint to understand the psychology of it. If you like somebody, it's really hard to fire them. Now, let's get to the legal reason why this is so important. The legal reason this is so important is because there is a formal process under what is called McDonnell-Douglas test. McDonnell-Douglas is a case that was decided in the late 1960s, and basically it set up burden shifting. In other words, the burden of proof changes with who is sort of up at bat. And the first person up at bat is the plaintiff, and they have to make a prima facie case. First, that the plaintiff is a member of a protected class. For example, they are African American, they're Hispanic, they are over the age of 40, they are a male or a female, and they're discriminated on the basis of their sex, right? Then the next thing they have to show is, particularly if they were already on the job, they were performing adequately and that there was no reason, no real reason to fire them. And the third thing they have to prove is an adverse job action. In other words, something happened. They were fired, they were demoted, they were removed from consideration for a promotion, they were not promoted. All of those things can go to establish discrimination. And then, based on that, they have established a prima facie case. Now, what happens after they establish a prima facie case? Well, the employer gets to come in and show a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for why they were terminated. So, for example, poor performance. This person was tardy 16 times in a month. This person took 96 smoke breaks an hour. Anything like that. Anything that goes to actual documentable things that go directly to the issue of performance on the job. In other words, if it's a performance related issue, it is legitimate as a non discriminatory reason. We often say, in the context of meeting with clients who think they may have a discrimination claim, that an employer can fire you for any reason or for no reason, but not for a protected reason or an unlawful reason. So if the company has a policy against wearing tennis shoes to work and you wear tennis shoes to work, you can be fired for that. And especially if that's stated up front and that's a legitimate basis, assuming that it has something to do with the job, that's a legitimate basis to let somebody go. But they can't only fire black workers who show up in tennis shoes, and because there are so many nice white people who come in tennis shoes, we can forgive them, but we can't forgive others. That's the kind of thing that gets you into trouble. So if you can, the next step then after the employer comes back and says, hey, the guy wore yellow tennis shoes, we had to get rid of him. Then the next step that the plaintiff comes back and says, well, yeah, but you didn't let go of Billy Bob or Jim or Susie May or any of these folks when they wore tennis shoes, but you did when you let me go. So that's called the pretext rationale. And assuming that a plaintiff can show that the prima facie case, the employer comes back and shows a legitimate non-discriminatory reason, and then they can make a case for pretext, whether they do it on statistics or some other basis, then there is a good likelihood that they will be able to get to a jury. And of course, once they get to a jury, the employer almost always has to settle unless they have a really, really strong case, because for the most part, juries are apt to believe that someone who is the only African American in a company with 30 white people was discriminated against. It may or may not be the case, but they are more than willing to believe that just on the optics of it. And as a result of that, this is one of the reasons why I say fire nice people. Now, let's step back a moment and think about that. First of all, nobody wants charity, right? Nobody wants to show up and sit in a chair and act nice all day and smile at people and get paid for it. They want to contribute. Most people want to contribute. Now, I know there are a few charlatans out there who just basically milk whatever company they're working for. They do things like that because they're one of those people who are not nice people at their core. But because they appear to be nice and everybody likes them, the assumption is that they should not be fired. But what this does is it actually works at an even more invidious form of discrimination against competent people. So you've got somebody who is supposed to answer the phone, but every 5 minutes they're running to the bathroom, right? Or they're running out to smoke a cigarette. In that situation, they are displacing their employee load onto the other employees in the operation. And as a result of that, the other employees have to pick up their load. And because they have to pick up their load, they are essentially stealing from those other employees by making them work harder while they take it easy. So, here are my rules for dealing with employees. First of all, The 90-day probationary period is not mythical. In other words, there are people who believe that once they're hired, boy, they're home free. I know it says there's a 90-day probationary period. Nobody pays any attention to that. Pay attention to it. Because generally speaking, if you document poor performance in the first 90 days, and it has to be performance related, in most states you can get by with terminating somebody on that basis within the first 90 days because they just didn't work out. But after 90 days, it makes it much more difficult to get rid of a bad employee. And for that reason, use that 90-day probationary period. And when they don't measure up in any respect, whether it's the amount of time that they are not at their desk or some other function, you should automatically document that and sit down with them and say, look, we need to talk about the fact that, 3 times today you went outside to take a smoke break and you're only allowed 2 breaks, 15 minutes each, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and you need to coordinate those with your supervisor. You don't get 3, right? Because you get a lunch in the middle, right? So you took 2 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, and you went out. And last time, the last 15-minute break was supposed to be 15 minutes. It was 20 minutes. We can't have you doing that. When you are not doing your job, someone else has to do your job for you. And they don't get paid to do your job. You get paid to do your job. Do you understand? Oh, yeah, I understand. Okay, I want you to write on this piece of paper that we talked about this. You can see where it says we talked about this. And I want you to write the words, I understand. So you have them write it, sign it, you put it in there and say, look, you're a valuable person. We want you here, but you got to toe the line. You have to understand that. I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm trying to help you do your job better. Now, if you get to the point where you just feel like you absolutely have to have nicotine, they make nicotine gum. And I don't mind you chewing nicotine gum, but I do mind you being away from the phone for 20 minutes at a time. Are we good? And let them go at that. And then if they don't meet the standard, then the next standard, next time you write them up, it's a written warning. I warned you before, verbally. You remember that? You wrote, I understand, but then you didn't do it. All right? Then if they still don't comply, you suspend them for 3 days. And if that doesn't work, by then they should already be looking for another job. If that doesn't work, then you terminate them. Absolutely no mercy. I don't care how good they are. I don't care how many other employees come to you and say, oh, but Sally is such a sweet girl, and she's always doing nice things for everybody. How can you be so mean as to even think about firing her? Well, you explain that when she isn't doing her job, you are doing her job for her. And you are not getting paid to do her job, you're getting paid to do yours. And so if you're busy doing her job and something falls apart on your job, who is going to be responsible for that? It's going to be you. So do you want to go down with the ship here? Do you want to go down with Sally? Or do you want to do your own job? Most of the time when you explain to people that way, they get the message. Absolutely no mercy. You fire the nice people because there seems to be a general predisposition, particularly in employee settings, to keep the nice people on even though they break the rules because they're nice people and because people get along with them. But then when you get somebody who is really looking for an employment discrimination payday, and that's not most people, that is less than 1% of the population that are out there, but they are out there, then they are there for 6 months and they see all the things that this person does wrong. And in most cases, they are going to come up to you and say, hey, how come she gets to have 3 smoke breaks? Oh, that's Sally. We like Sally. She's got a little nicotine problem, but it's not that big a deal. But right here it says, you only get 2 breaks. Yeah, well, sometimes we forgive that. You know what I mean? And so they pay attention to that. And then when they start taking longer breaks and you fire them, they have a discrimination case because they can now claim that the reason that you're firing them is not because they're not a nice person. It's because of the color of their skin, their race, their religion, any of the other protected categories. So you have to be very diligent about having the standards written out up front and holding people accountable to those standards. Because if you don't, then at some point you're going to wind up in front of a court trying to explain why you treated one person differently than another, and that is not ever going to be a good look for you. So that's my reason, that's my rationale for why you should fire nice people. But I want to make sure you understand it's firing nice people who don't do the job, as opposed to just randomly going out and saying, wow, that's a nice guy, let me get rid of him. Because I wouldn't want that standard applied to me, and I don't think anybody else would either. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, maybe a little bit entertaining. And if you would, I'd really appreciate a like, a share, a subscribe, anything you can think of to do. If you have a chance today, take some time, do something nice for someone. I have a son-in-law, and he works straight through lunch every day. He doesn't even have time to get a sandwich. So today, since I have to be out anyway, I'm going to go take him a sandwich. So I just thought I would share that with you. It's my nice thing today. I'm going to do something nice for my son-in-law. Thanks again for watching, and have a marvelous day.
If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.